Hello, I'm Ron Miscavige, and this is another life lesson. So let's get right into it, and welcome to the show, by the way. All right, today what I want to do is I'm going to do a life lesson, but it's involved around an incident that happened in about 1954, and this is in a place called Hydrocarbon Research. It's a place that I worked at after I got out of the Marine Corps. Now, hydrocarbon research is actually the definition of it is what it does. They do research on hydrocarbon products like oil, like coal silt, as an example. And this particular incident took place when we were doing research on coal silt in a certain manner. And part of that experiment, I guess you could call it an experiment or research, what was involved in that was several things. Number one was a high-pressure steam boiler. And when I say high pressure, I'm talking about that steam is under about 250 pounds per square inch pressure, which then makes the steam not 212 degrees or just above that, but it runs into the hundreds of degrees. It could be like maybe 400 degrees, which is very hot for steam. Also part of it was oxygen, liquid oxygen. And in this plant, in the back end of the property, is where this took place. It was a huge Quonset hut type building, and in that building literally was a piece of equipment. I would say it's, let's say an average size room, 4 of them, 2 stories tall, like a small house, and it produced liquid oxygen. Part of the nuttiness that used to take place in that is technicians would have to take a sample of the liquid oxygen once every hour to determine the purity of it. And there's no shit. They used to do this. They take a cigarette and put the oxygen on it and show that it burned the cigarette down to nothing. Now imagine, they're putting a lit cigarette on liquid oxygen coming out. Anyway, some people like to live dangerous. So that was part of it. And then also, there was another high-pressure boiler in that room that had another job to do, but contained in the room where I was the steam boiler, another compressor, and the liquid oxygen producing plant. Now, here's what this project consisted of, and I did a drawing, otherwise you're never going to be able to follow this. And okay, so it's rough, but you get the idea. This is from here to the top of it is about 65 feet. In other words, you're talking about 6.5 story high project. And these things are iron I-beams going from the bottom to the top. Here are steps that go around the side of this so you can walk up the steps to the top. And in the center, there is a round tube or rod, and it's about 2 feet in diameter. And in the center of it, there's a 2-inch hole. Now, the silt is pumped in or squeezed in like by a screw, like a sausage machine that pushes the silt in. Also put in there is liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Around that tube is wrapped wire that heats up the rod to a certain heat. And then also around that is copper tubing that the high pressure steam is going through, and that high pressure steam stabilizes the heat of this. If you didn't have that steam around it, it could take off and you'd have hot spots along the side and you could melt the tube. It would get so goddamn hot. So this is the scene. This is what I'm going to talk about right now. Okay, so you got that so far. Now, I ran a high-pressure steam boiler, and I ran it by reading a book on engineering as I was running it. Anyway, I was assigned to it. I was considered pretty sharp, and they gave me like a miniature, or you call a mini course on what this thing is supposed to do. So I was reading an engineering book on how to do it as I was standing there running it. My main job was this. There was a steam boiler in front of me, and I stood at an engineering desk with the book there, and I would look up at a little hole that was there with glass to make sure that I could see a flame in there. Because if that flame went out, that meant that the steam was going to lose pressure. It would lose its stabilization that it had on that rod going up in that tower, and the goddamn thing could melt. Got that so far. So now I'm working a double shift, and I'm about halfway through the second shift, which means I've been working 12 hours, and I'm really tired. And I look up, and a fucking light went out. Okay. As soon as that light went out, within a minute, an alarm goes off. That means we're on alert. There's danger abounding. So I yell for the foreman, Louis Hallebuck, who knew everything about the project. He comes running, and he sees that the light went out, and he says, come outside with me. We went outside where the oil was, which was being pumped in to fire up the actual steam boiler. Meanwhile, going out, we go through this room where on one wall there's a ton of dials and meters and everything, and you got about 10 engineers in there watching every step of the way, and they're shouting at each other orders. I mean, but they're precise and they're very focused. And that fucking alarm is going beep, beep, beep. So we run outside and we go over to where the oil tank was, and outside of it there's a pump. And we could see on the inlet of the pump, it was about 150 pounds pressure. No, excuse me, about 50 pounds pressure. On the outlet, no pressure, which means there was an oil plug. So Louis said, grab a pipe, grab a hammer. And I followed him, and we started beating the pipe. We beat it, and finally the plug gave loose, and the oil started flowing through. So we run into the building. Now, by the way, just to let you know what would happen, if we didn't control this, there was a possibility of that rod melting at some point along the way, or the bottom falling over, and if it fell in the direction of the oxygen plant, you could blow up the plant in part of the city block. So that was the danger involved. So we run in, open up the door to the steam boiler. Louis takes a long rod, puts a rag on it with gas on, puts it in, we turn on the oil, catch the fire, close the door. So now this is, we're a bit of danger here, and I don't mind telling you, I was pretty goddamn scared. But I knew what I was doing, and I knew that Louis knew exactly what they was doing. And I also knew all the engineers were focused on what they were doing. Time is going by. Finally, we're up to pressure. Within minutes after that, the alarm goes off. All danger is done. If we had a bunch of eggheads on those meters in there, or those engineers didn't know what the hell they were doing, or I didn't, or Louis didn't, I might not be here talking to you about this. Because that rod could have melted, come over and hit the oxygen producing plant, blew up, end. Now, what's the lesson here? Well, first of all, I can tell you this, and it's a phenomena that a little hard for me to understand, because usually at the end of a shift, everybody just goes and picks up their lunch can, walks out the door. At the end of the shift, everybody who was involved in that stood around talking for a good 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour before anybody left. And the point I want to make is this. If you, as part of a group, confront some danger and are successful in handling it as a group, you have the makings of a true group right there. And your affinity for each other and your liking of each other and wanting to communicate for people goes up. I observed it with my own eyes. But here is the lesson, and learn this, because you don't have to learn it if you don't want to, but I'm telling you, it's for your own good. If you have a job, do everything you can to learn as much as you can about the job you have. Not just the particular job, but how it affects other things around you. And if it's possible, insist, or lightly insist, because sometimes people don't, if you say, hey, you got to learn your job, they'll get pissed off and won't do it. But lightly suggest, hey, maybe you should study up about what you're doing here, like I am. Look at this book. There's a lot of data in here about my job, and I enjoy it. See if you can exert some environmental control and get other people to do the same thing. I am telling you, this is a lesson worth learning and applying in your life. There's no way that you can't be more successful by applying this. And and also all the other lessons I'm talking about. These are hard-won lessons. These are things that I've lived, so it's not like I read them in a book someplace. I observed what happened there, and I knew that the data I got from that little engineering book, boy, I'll tell you, I'm glad that I spent time doing that. I used to read that all the time when I wasn't watching the fire to make sure it wouldn't go out. But anyway, that's the lesson. Get knowledgeable about the work you're going to do. And it's true. Look, not every fucking job is going to, have a possibility of ending your life. I don't mean that. But this was an instance where it could have happened. So it was a lesson that I learned. And hey, this is 1954. And I remember it as if it happened yesterday. So learn as much as you can. Get knowledgeable. Study up on your job. And even about life in general. It's good to read different philosophical books and see what other people say about life. And if it's possible, insist on others around you do the same thing. So that's today's life lesson. And of course, if you'd like to, you can contribute to the ongoingness of this program and become a Patreon. If you go to my website, which is therealronmiscavige.com, you'll see how you can become a patron for like maybe $1 or $2 or $5 or whatever you want to give per month. It helps to keep this program going. And also on there you can see the other things, other books I've written, and also other things that I do. I interview other people. So check it out. I'd appreciate it. And meanwhile, thank you very much for listening, and see if you can get some others to do the same thing. So meanwhile, I'm Ron Miscavige. This is Life Lessons, and I'll see you on the next lesson. Bye-bye for now.